I'm Nave Avimor with distance. And I'm panicked about bikes.
Nut.
Hello, Howard.
Who newt?
That's who me.
The subject of today is no one corrects me when I say a foreigner's name wrong.
Okay.
I don't know what it is about foreigners.
They have strange sounding names, like
people
me.
Call you Nut, and I always have to go, or Newt, and I go, it's Canute.
Yeah.
I just think that hard K is hard at the beginning.
Of course it is.
Unless it's with the C. Canuck. So I think if your name was C-N-U-T, people would say Canute.
Yeah, probably.
All right. Well, I think in America, your driver's license should say C-N-U-T. Can you imagine cops pulling over going, what's the fucking smart ass with your C-N-U-T?
Yeah.
God, I could be so much funnier with your name.
Oh, yes.
I mean, Howard's so plain. Howard so wouldn't commit fraud.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have a lot to work with Howard.
There's never been a Howard that committed fraud. There's Howard Hughes, didn't cut his nails, peed in bottles. I missed that. That was a great movie. You remember the Howard Hughes movie?
No, I can't.
You would love it. He crashed a plane. Speaking of crashing, what a segue.
Ooh.
Today, we're going deep into a subject that, the only thing I really do other than work is biking, cycling. I don't know if it's biking or cycling, but I love to cycle. My friend cycled, I'm trying to think when I really got into it. In the 90s, doing triathlons with my buddies in Toronto after college, the Bud Light Tour. So I got into triathlons. Then I gave it up because you have kids and you put on 20, 30 pounds and you settle in to death, the death march, as I would call it.
I remember you cycling in during college.
Yeah, but I was thin.
Well, we can eat and drink anything back then. Who cares?
Man, I was skinny. My nickname was Bones back in those days, remember? Oh, life was good.
It's been so long since you've fit that name, so, it's hard to tell. Sorry.
Then, are you done? And then my friend Michael Kinsbergen, who I need to have on the show, ran AX soccer team, really good friend in LP, and we met at a speaking engagement in Amsterdam many years ago. He dared me. He kind of just said, Howard, come to, I was at peak Howiestown. I was like 208. I remember I'm in Hong Kong, and it was like 30 days before I had to go to the Alps. So I had to go back from Hong Kong to Phoenix probably. And I was like, fuck, 30 days. I really need to start. Like, I didn't have any idea of, like, what climbing the Alps would be.
Right.
And maybe we won't have time for the guests, but this is a good story. So I'm, like, there was no Peloton. I was just on some bike pedaling. It was so humid. And I was just on some bike looking at mountains in Hong Kong. And, it was like 30 days to go before I'd be in the Alps. And I was just like, I didn't know they planned to just kill a Jew in the Alps. I don't know why I said yes to this thing, but I was now dared to go to the Alps. And 30 days later, and I had biked so much at a younger age that it was not like that I didn't know how to bike. It was just like nothing could prepare me for a June snowstorm in Davos, climbing out of Davos into the Alps. Yeah, and a few days later doing Stelvio. Which I just did again this summer in 2 hours less than I did it the first time.
Oh,
so I survived, and I had the bug. Okay, and I got myself down to about 192 at the end of that thing. And then now I'm about 185 to 188. It's hard for me to get lower, but I love biking. I don't know where we're going with this, but I love biking. And then I discovered, I think one day walking in Soho, I discovered this brand, Rafa. And it was like a coffee shop meets a retailer meets Lulu. And, as an affinity, I just started wearing, I gave up Lulu and I just started wearing, even though I'm not a cyclist, I just started wearing the Rafa brand. And I just became enamored. I finally had a brand that spoke to, me, culture, Soho, hip, overpriced, and
It spoke to you.
and no one knew what it was. And I'm like wearing this brand forever, and slowly everybody's like, "Oh, Rafa," and went to the original. I'm a brand guy, and I'm a sucker.
You're a
I'm a sucker
trendsetter.
for overpaying. No, I'm not. I didn't start Rafa. I'm a trend follower. But now they're owned by Walmart. Long story short, Walmart bought them. The two. So you really don't know the story, obviously, but. So the brothers and Nave, who's our guest, will correct me on this maybe, but because he knows the brand. The Walmart sons are cyclists, and they've built hundreds of miles of cycling thing behind in wherever Omaha, wherever the headquarters is of Walmart, and they bought the brand for like $150 million.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, I don't want to wear Walmart stuff when I cycle now. No. I mean, what do? Cycle over to Walmart and say, welcome to Walmart? I'm not worried. Rafa now might as well just say $ WMT on it. So it's weird, but it's not their fault. Like, the brothers love cycling, and they bought this brand.
Yeah.
So for a while, I'm like, why isn't there must be hundreds of other, cool cycling brands, overpriced cycling brands, that I, too, now would wear instead of Rafa, where I spend $10,000 to $20,000 a year and hundreds of thousands of elites or stupid people, as we call them, go and instead of Lulu, buy Rafa.
Right.
So, it bothered me because it was so well executed as a brand. The coffee store, the ambiance, the e-commerce.
I mean, sorry.
Genius.
The
It took
Walmart brand degrades it. I'm sorry.
to me,
Yeah,
it's
it
the
does.
same product.
I
But
know,
also,
still.
I want to experiment. So anyways, I get a cold call. I think it was like about a year and a half ago. Cold email from our guest, Nave, and his wife, Sharona. And they want to build kind of like what in my head was a far-fetched of cycling. Aggregate all the brands that you have never discovered, California and Europe, aggregate them onto one site so I can just trust their curation.
Right.
And buy everybody's overpriced cycling gear. So aggregate the elites and stupid people that overpay, that just want to wear the best and try out different high-end fashion. Like, find your next brand. Long story short, we kind of precede. It was the era of overpriced startups, and to their credit, Nave and Sharona, we hit it off after the cold email. We met in San Diego, flew out, and we did their pre-seed deal, and now the site is launched.
Oh, nice.
And the brand is called Distance, but I'm probably saying it wrong, but it's DSTNC, and as in nancyc.com. So Distance without the vowels. And they've done a phenomenal job over the last 8 months building out this beautiful media / high-end aggregation e-commerce site with all the best, what I think. I mean, they're curating for me. I know, and we'll get into it. Nave was a professional cyclist in Israel. He weighs like 11 pounds. Whenever I see him, I'm worried that he'll break. And we haven't ridden together. We've just, because he kind of doesn't ride that much, and I live in Phoenix, and he lives up in the valley. But I wanted to have him on now that the site is launched, and we're out raising their seed round, and have him talk about, the journey to building this brand with his wife. They spent some time in China. Obviously, like I said, they grew up in Israel and now living in San Francisco. And they're doing, like, kind of building the next version of what, helping all these brands build their market.
Sweet.
So, ready to get him on the phone? Or do we have time?
We might have about 7 minutes left for him, yeah.
It's my podcast. This could go on. This could be like the Ten
It's gonna be a
Commandments.
hard
This
time.
could be like 3 hours. This is our Joe Rogan
He's
episode.
here, he's on, and he is ready.
Hello.
Nave.
Nave, yeah, it's actually Nave.
And how do you pronounce your last name, since I probably butchered that for a year?
It's Avimor. You spell it Avimor.
And is that French or is that Israeli?
Avimor is Israeli. It's the Hebrew meaning. So my dad was born in Germany. When he moved to Israel, he changed the name. The original name was like Strasberg or something like that. So he wanted like a Hebrew name. And so that's how we ended up with Avimor.
So you grew up in Israel?
Yep. Grew up in Israel.
And when did you get into cycling?
So got into cycling when I was actually 12, or even a little bit before, but I started racing when I was 12. I actually started when I was really young, started playing basketball. Then my aunt and her husband were big cyclists since the 80s. So they lived in south of Israel near Beersheba. So it's a kind of like a desert landscape. And I used to go there every summer, basically with my bike, and used to ride with them. And I was stoked just by, going out in the nature and riding mountain bikes. So I started with mountain bike. That's how everybody started in Israel. And yeah, and when I was 12, I got my first road bike and started to race, left basketball, and, the rest is history.
Now, in Israel, do mountain bikes come with machine gun turrets just because of where the land is situated?
And not really, but
that would be frowned upon.
I actually remember training. It was one of the wars, one of them, and they were shooting missiles on the area where we lived. And I remember actually trying to find the best place to train where there is a zero possibility they will actually aim to that direction because there is no one lived there. So it's like they probably want to kill people. So I'll go and ride and try to train where it's like, in the wilderness, nothing's going to happen. And yeah, I remember that. I remember also like hiding, hearing the siren and hiding in a gas station.
And so you did your military service.
Yeah.
And when did you meet Sharona?
So I met Sharona back in 28. She's going to kill me. 28 or 29. Moved to Tel Aviv. Sharona comes from a PR background. And then she got an offer to move to China for this wholesale fashion company. And we wanted to move to the US. And we said, okay, so let's first go to China, see what's going on, maybe start a business there at a certain point, and then move to the US. So that's how we ended up in China.
And what city did you guys live in?
We lived in Shanghai, and we moved to Shenzhen. Shenzhen is a nice, relatively new city, but big. It's about, 13 million people. That's considered like a medium city in China.
Size.
Yeah.
And Shanghai's the best, though.
Shanghai is one of the best cities in the world. It's actually, if it was up to me, I would move to Shanghai.
And what did you like about it?
Shanghai, it's beautiful. It's a mix. First of all, it's a very cosmopolitan city. There's a mixture of cultures. There is this old traditional China that has some European flair to it. But on the other hand, it feels like, not that I lived in New York in the 70s, but it feels like New York in the 70s. The pace, everything is new, the energy outside, and the people. I think like the people was one of the best things that I liked about Shanghai. Mostly foreigners. When you meet them, they have like so special stories. Like, if you end up living in Shanghai, you probably have a, interesting story to tell or what you're doing there. So, really unique kind of people. That's like really what attracted me the most.
And so in Israel, when did you get discovered to be on the Israeli cycling team? How does that work? Are we the only person on the team? And how many people were named Moses? There's a lot of questions, so just start out.
Actually, to be honest, I don't know anyone personally that's called Moses. But that's just me. So the cycling team, the Israeli cycling team that from these days, is a relatively new team. So it's actually started as an initiative. It was called Israeli Cycling Academy, which was supposed, they had one goal, is to bring Israeli cyclists to the top of the industry, basically, to race in the Tour de France or race in the Giro, one of the Grand Tours. So put Israel on the map in terms of professional cycling. So it started as what's called a cycling academy, which is a kind of like
a club.
Yeah, it's kind of like a club or a development team. It's something that happens a lot in Europe. You have development teams, and then you have the actual pro team. Well, also in soccer, it's the same. So they started with this cycling academy, and then they got the a Pro Tour license from Katusha, which was a Russian team that retired. That was, I think, 4, 5, even 6 years ago. And then they started to race basically in the Pro Tour. So as you know, Pro Tours is like the equivalent to the Champions League. You have 12 teams in each year, and the last 2 teams they're going down from the Pro Tour.
And one moves up.
And 2 moves up. 2 new ones moves up. So there is a Pro Tour and there is the Continental. And that's what defines the Champions League from the other teams.
And how was the Israeli team stacking up? Like, I mean, you have the perfect, I mean, I don't know if you always were like this, but you have that, like, cycling build, very lean and, tall, but not a jockey small. So tall, like, I don't know, you're 5'9", 5'10"?
Yeah, something like that. 175 centimeters.
How much do you weigh right now, even though you're not riding?
How do you know that I'm not riding?
Well, you're riding a little, but because you told me.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, I'm not riding right now. Yeah. Last time I went for a ride was like 3-4 weeks ago.
So you always had that build?
Yeah, I always had that build. It's something that we called in cycling physical talent. It's just you're born with a physique. It's not something that you can really develop at a later stage.
Right.
Like basketball, that you can develop your skill. You can stand and literally shoot all day and become a better shooter. Cycling, if you're not born with this physique, it will be very hard for you to actually be a good cyclist. So there's like an optimal body for a cyclist, but also there's like different roles in cycling. So different bodies have like different roles in the race. You have sprinters, you have climbers, you have all-rounders like Lance Armstrong that can climb really well, but also do a time trial really strong. So I was a climber because that's my physique. I'm not that tall, but I have long legs and I have a thin body and really like not a lot of body fat. So it probably came natural for me. It's not that I thought about it when I was like 12 or something.
And have you ever done drugs with Lance?
No, actually, that was my dream, is to actually do some drugs with Lance.
That was my dream.
Yeah.
Look at that. One must dream. So how many people were on an Israeli cycling team?
So just to put things in order, I was not part of the Israeli Cycling Academy. So they started actually a long way after I left Israel.
Got it. Do you miss that lifestyle, or you just moved to Shanghai and that was it? That was the end of it?
If you're asking if I missed the prime years as a professional cyclist, nope, not really. I think like one of the reasons that I actually left the sport as a pro was that I suffered a lot. Like that's part of cycling. You enjoy suffering. You learn how to enjoy the suffer.
Yeah.
But for me, it added also, when I moved to actually start to race in Europe, it added another dimension of like a lot of mental pressure. So suddenly, from being like one of the best riders, suddenly you're just a domestique. Domestique is the rider that's doing all the work for the leaders.
Right.
So you're just a domestique, and basically there's a lot of internal politics. So
I've watched a Netflix show. It just sounds like a brutal life.
Yeah. And so everybody wants to be the best. Everybody wants to prove. Everyone wants to race. And there's like, the team roster for the race, sometimes like just 6, sometimes just 8. You have to be on that roster for the team. Otherwise, you can't prove yourself. And you need to prove yourself inside the team. So trainings and so on, and really like climb your way up. That's the mental pressure that existed also. In hindsight, I went to the UK instead of going to Italy. Actually, it was my dream to live in Tuscany and just drink my espresso in the morning and go out for a ride.
Yeah. I'm the same way, man. Like, I discovered Tuscany not for the booze, but for the coffee and it's not super suffering, right? Especially the Tuscany. It's just suffering. It's maybe the best kind of riding suffering, because every 6 kilometers you can just stop in a village or at the top of a small 3-5K hill, mountain, whatever you would call it in Tuscany, and eat and everybody. It's just normal.
And they give you respect there. If you ride bikes in Italy, you're like a hero.
Yeah, and
So, I love that.
Yeah, it's not different than me, because wherever I go, I'm a hero. But it's nice. It's nice to be a hero on a bike, a fat guy on a bike. The brand is called Distance. So tell me how this idea came about.
Yeah. We actually knew that we were going to do something in the space of fashion meets activewear.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted to go into yoga, and it's like athleisure or like something in the intersection. But then we started to see, like, look at the market, and it was like so crowded. Lululemon was doing, like, they were phenomenal back then. And it was obvious to everyone at the beginning of the pandemic that probably all the shopping behavior is going to shift to something that's more valuable. People are not going to spend on, mass fashion and fast fashion and stuff. They're going to really invest money in things that are going to be valuable to their life. So we knew this definitely being in the fitness, sport, activewear space. That's the word to go. But then I remember sitting with Sharona after I was like bragging for the whole year about like how the cycling industry is like stuck 10 years ago. All the websites are the same. It's like super developed, but retail is like really not where it should be these days. And I came from fashion e-commerce, which is probably most innovative industry in e-commerce.
Yep.
And had all these, basic things that are happening in e-commerce and fashion that are just, that do not exist in cycling. So I was like bragging about it a lot, but never thought that we're actually going to end up doing something with cycling until we just one day we spoke about it and says like, wait a second, everything's like, there's no way to actually buy a premium cycling kits in the US. There's only Rafa. There's another brand that's called MAP that is doing a great job.
Yep.
And we see some other brands like Cafe du Cyclist that really have like a great, massive community, but they're very local, and you don't, like, if you meet someone that's wearing Cafe du Cyclist, and it's like, there's no way to buy it in the US.
Yep.
You have to place an order. It ships from France. The size is incorrect, so you need to return it.
The size is like, what are people in Paris? Like a triple XL's, like it doesn't get over my left nipple.
So first of all, Europeans are, much thinner than Americans. Also, the sizing standard is a little bit different. So an American medium is like an extra large in Europe.
Right.
So sizing is a big issue. And I think like we started to look at the space. We started to like see what's going on in the industry, what's going on in the market. And it's like, what's the problem? Because there are so many good brands out there that are really doing a great job in their local communities. From Germany to Australia. Australia, by the way, is one of the biggest markets in the world for cycling. They're big cyclists. One of the best cyclists in the world are actually coming.
What brand do we carry that's from? Is there like a great brand?
Yeah, Pedal Mafia is actually from Australia.
Did not know that. Thought that was California. I love it.
Yeah, they're half of them are based in LA, but originally they're from Australia.
Did not know that.
Yep. So we started to look like what's going on in the market, what's missing, like why these great brands that are really doing a great job in their local communities. And when you start to check them out, you see that they all follow like the same best practices that Rafa actually did. So if you look at Rafa is actually a fashion brand that they just happen to operate in the cycling industry.
Got it.
And they all follow like the best practices of Rafa, but not really doing the shift of penetrating the US market. It's like their channel is pretty much their direct-to-consumer channel, You can go on their website. We have Shopify today, so all the websites look modern and nice. But if you actually start and place order in cycling, it's like cycling kits. Sizing is very crucial. It's just impossible to buy cycling clothes. Definitely, if not a bib costs like $250, and you end up with a bib and jersey for like $500, and it just doesn't match. You need to return it to Europe, and it's very costly, and it's just not a way to actually sell premium clothes.
Right.
And one of the best things that Rafa did is penetrating the U.S. market by actually being present here. From brick and mortar stores to clubs, to have their all e-commerce operation based out of Portland. Now by the way, it's Bentonville, Arkansas, and that's where the Walmart sits.
Yep.
So all their operations was here in the U.S. and they were like operating like like a fashion e-commerce website or brand. So when you go, you order stuff from Rafa, it's free shipping over a certain amount, I think 75 or something, and you get it, like 5-6 days, not the fastest, but it's pretty efficient because it's USPS, so we're used to it. And then if you need to return it, there's a return label in the package, and you just return it and forget about it. They process the refund, you order, you exchange, whatever. It's it's like e-commerce should be.
Yeah.
And it's just not happening outside of the US, or these guys, like, they're not even aware that this is like basic. And in addition to that, most of the bike shops, or I would say all the bike shops in America, have the same business model of the classic independent bike shop, which is probably similar to how a car agency works. You have the workshop and you're selling cars.
Yep.
So you're selling bikes. You're not really making a lot of money selling bikes because the profit margin is really low. And we're talking about like selling bikes, high-end bikes, the profit margin is about 20%. So you're selling bikes and you start to actually make profit when the customer comes into your workshop and start to do maintenance to the bike, and you're supposed to selling him all the accessories. So helmets, shoes, clothes, all the other stuff. That's how you actually acquire the customer.
Good.
Yeah.
Yep.
But they are not built to actually operate an e-commerce fashion business. And when we're talking about selling clothes and apparel, it's fashion at the end of the day.
Technology's finally come for the bike, right? Like,
oh yeah,
I hadn't heard the word gravel bike probably 2 years ago, and now
that's funny.
And maybe if I heard it, I didn't know. I assumed that it wouldn't be for me, and now I don't know why I would use a road bike. Because at my age, I like the fat tire. Like if there was a tire the size of the Harley that worked on my cycling frame, and now they've built this frame that makes me feel like I'm a road cyclist, and I feel 5 times safer on a gravel bike.
Yeah, the industry definitely went through a big shift in the past, I'd say 6-7 years, where a lot of mites were basically exploded because, my era, we used to put like 120 PSI in our tires because...
Jesus, I went and got my gravel bike and they laughed at me. Because I had 80, 90, and they were like, dude, this should be 40.
Yeah.
That blew my mind.
Yeah. A lot has changed. Like we were taught, but that the more rigid the tire is,
the faster you could go.
The faster it will be because there's less rolling resistance. But we actually learned in the past few years that
fascinating. That is like such a myth, or as you would say, myth.
Myth. I don't know, but it's
Canute, Newt. Nave. So that is maybe one of the what's the other biggest myth that's blowing up about brakes, right? Like the pros were like anti.
Yeah, the pros were anti the disc brake. So disc brake started into mountain bikes about 20 years ago, I think. Don't catch me on.
I think it's the greatest, one of the greatest inventions for somewhat fear and safety.
Yeah, it all comes from Formula One. first of all.
Oh,
It's like all the
okay.
technology that we have in cars these
That's
days,
cool.
from ABS to traction control to hydraulic brakes. Everything comes from Formula One, right? Because they're pushing the innovation. So we had like disc brakes came into mountain bikes about 20 years ago, maybe more, like don't remember, but when they started, so the industry went through some kind of like a sleepy period where there's no much innovation in how they sell bikes. So, bikes, it's two wheels, stem and a handlebar and maybe a saddle. Depends if you like it or not. But there was no like extra innovation here. So you would buy a bike, and here I'm like I'm a little bit criticizing the industry, but on a positive note, you had to find something to innovate to get people stoked about bikes and just replace
the hobby of it.
Yeah.
They needed to create it a hobby.
And then, how do you push the envelope? You just, let's bring disc brakes into road bikes, because this can literally change the entire industry. But how do you put a disc brake on such a thin wheel? So you have to actually increase the rim, the width of the rim, then increase the width of the hub, and basically build a much stronger wheel that can carry the massive power that the disc brake is putting on the wheel. Because if you put it on a very thin, the classic road wheel, it's probably going to break the wheel pretty fast.
Didn't know that.
Yeah. So that's how they came up with disc brakes into road bikes. And yeah, there is this thing, at the end of the day, when you're a pro cyclist and you are sponsored, 99% of your gear is sponsored, you don't really have a say if you want to ride with rim brakes or disc brakes.
Didn't know that. I thought it was because of weight and because of speed.
It's a combination of both. I did not make I personally didn't make the move to disc brakes, just because I'm not willing to change my my cycling technique or like the riding experience. It's a little bit different. I know it's not massive, but I'm just I feel more comfortable and confident with my rim brakes. I think my bikes look much better with rim brakes than disc brakes, and it's kind of like it's also, I'm not gonna lie, but I like when people see that I'm riding like a $20,000 bike with rim brakes, and they was like, "What?" And it's like, yeah.
I would never notice, but yes. So a revolution has happened in biking, and it could just be because of global wealth. It could be because of free time. It could be
social media.
Oh, okay.
Suddenly you see people going outside, and there was like a research that I read about 2 years ago that they made about like what's causing people to get excited so much about seeing people ride outside. And there's something about the fact that you see people have this like freedom of like rolling on two wheels with the wind outside and the nature and everything. That's really attracts a lot of people to like, I want to be in that situation. I want to be there. I want to do this. I want to start to ride bikes. And I see it a lot when I start to talk about bikes, or like even like friends ask me what to buy, and I'm like starting to recommend just friends that wants to commute. And they start to see all these bikes and stuff, and they get excited. And some of them like literally became, big cyclists just because, they were exposed to all this content on social media.
Unbelievable. I did not know that. So you're positioned perfectly for the trend. The reason I think this is interesting, because I don't want to, I can't discover all this stuff. I need a tastemaker. I need a curator. So what's the end game of this? I mean, for me, it's just a straight bet on the growth of, road biking. I don't know the mountain biking industry, but I assume mountain biking, but gravel biking and e-biking, right? This is a lifestyle.
So yeah, e-bikes is definitely, it's going to be the number one electric vehicle in the world. And some big brands are doing great job in e-bike, also in China. And gravel is probably I would say the best thing that happened to cycling. I don't know. Here's the thing. Gravel was here always. Like, it's funny because we used to go, I remember we used to climb when we were young. You used to climb one of the mountains in my hometown. And when you get to the top of the climb, there's another climb that goes on a gravel road. So we just, used to take this gravel road, and sometimes we even took our road bikes and started to like go with the road bike on a single trek inside a forest, and like just checking like look how we can like, have this technique with no shocks, and it's like very thin wheel and so on. So we were kids, but, gravel was there always. Also in Europe, one of the most famous races in Italy is actually a gravel race. Like most of the races on the gravel road.
Yeah.
And it's a classic race.
I don't think I could make it. That road looks brutal.
Yeah. But it's just that it started to go onto a mainstream once the industry started to define gravel bikes. So there's road bike and there's gravel bike. And gravel bike basically opened an opportunity to get the sport of road cycling to be much more accessible. So gravel is a great solution. You can go and ride distances because you literally ride on a road bike, but then it's like it has this traction because you have wider rims and wider tires, and you can actually go and do some technical stuff with your bike. And, when you think about it, it's one of the most fun things to do.
It's the most liberating thing I get to do.
Exactly.
It's my yoga.
It's not even, you don't have cars. I used to run a lot, like, cause I used to be like, after I moved out of Israel, when I moved to China, I was introduced to trail running, and I started to run ultras. And there was something in running trails that was missing from road cycling in particular, because it's the quiet, it's the nature, it's that being in the zone that in road cycling doesn't exist all the time. No. You have cars, and you need to be very concentrated, and sometimes you ride with a group, so it's very demanding. But gravel, you just take your bike, you go in the nature, and you can just ride, wherever you want, and just lose yourself in the nature.
So it's gravel and e-bike. And let's just go through before I say goodbye, because we can talk forever, the brands. I love some of the stuff you've picked. You are my tastemaker, so I think you and Sharona can be the tastemaker for hundreds of thousands of to curate. So you've introduced me to a post-Rafa world. My favorite brands, I just trust whatever's on your site. I'm like trying. I love Pedal Mod. I just love the name and the attitude of it. I'm glad to hear it's from Australia. It's hard for me to like anything German, but I love, what's the name of the brand that I like?
It's very expensive. Bueller. It's one of my...
Bueller, like Ferris Bueller. It's Bueller, but very comfortable. Very comfortable. Yeah. And then there's ASOS or OSO.
ASOS is...
love there. Where are they? Swiss?
ASOS is around before Rafa. So if you're talking about premium cycling kits that is very slick, it's ASOS. ASOS actually started to bring... They were the first one that actually brought the black collar into cycling, which is very common now. We wear a lot of like dark clothes, which is...
Yeah, I love black. Yeah. I do love black. What... you introduced me to 100%. It's the greatest high price. I don't care about price because it mixes fashion with tech. I call it Fashology. I hate the word athleisure, but the 100% is ridiculous, and the POC stuff is great too.
Yeah.
And so, how do you discover all this stuff? How do you stay ahead of this curve?
I'm living and breathing, every day. So, I know all the brands basically. I follow all of them. It's just, it's also my hobby. I like direct-to-consumer brands in fashion in general. So I just know all of them.
So let's end with crashing. I have only had one big crash. I had a little one, tiny one. Because I was joking with Canute before, I was like, my next crash, whether it's on my Peloton or road bike, is my last crash, right? Like, it's just, I don't really think about it. Most of my close calls have just been an asshole driver. And that's why I'm so excited about gravel biking, because the roads here, when it does it rain or when it's really, really dry forever, it's just a lot of shit on the road. And so the wider tire surface is just like, I'm a convert even for riding on the road with my gravel bike. And it just feels like I have less percentage, even it's probably just mental. but it feels like I'm just safer, not from cars, just from tipping or falling because of a rock or a rut.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a big crash?
I had a couple of big crashes. Not recently.
Do you remember? I don't remember much.
I remember one. I just remember because I fainted like 2 minutes after. I opened all my chin was like scratching.
So you went over the top?
Scratching the asphalt. But I was very young. Don't remember a big crash recently.
Oh, good.
I crashed when I was running a few years ago. I rolled like 20 stairs. It was in China. There is a lot of steps in the mountains. You can go into a mountain, and instead of like a trail, there's actually steps. And that's painful.
I did that in Como. There's a lot of steps.
Yeah.
And I had a little bit of a tumble, which makes you just feel old. Well, anyways, this has been, I'm super excited about this. You know that because we talk all the time. And it's endless possibilities because of tech and e-commerce. And, you know, I think what people need to understand here is it's not just that you're curating, it's you're solving this logistics problem for both sides, right? The customer needs to feel like they don't have to return back to France, like with Café de Cyclist. How many brands do you think it could be that are good enough to get through? Is it 100? Is it 50? Like they could get through your stress test?
The ideal will be 100. There's a lot of room beyond just the clothes. So one of the things that we're actually starting to explore now is the exotic parts.
Huh.
Buying a stem or a saddle or a seat post that it's like super unique and light and made from handmade carbon in a workshop in Italy. That's something that probably the very hardcore cyclists know about. They see it on social media. They see it everywhere. But it's just it's just a dream. You don't know how to get it. You need to go to a bike store to actually get this stuff. And you just need a place to actually go and be able to order it. And, you know, these guys, they know how to make parts. They know how to make a great product. I think that's where we come in. We know how to sell products. We know how to present it, and we know the U.S. market, and we know e-commerce. And that's...
Yeah, very exciting. I mean, this is endless possibilities. Knut, what do you think? Interesting, right?
Very, very interesting.
Have you ever... You're too tall to ride. But e-biking, I think you could do.
I don't know.
And you don't care about fitness. So those two things
ridden
against
a lot.
or fashion.
I'm just. Wait
a minute, why are you
I'm
here?
just a naturally fit person. That's the thing.
Oh my God, man! I miss playing golf with Knut. So it was always fun. You were tall. You managed the golf course well. You loved the game. Well, dude, Nave, this was great.
My pleasure.
I can't wait to see what we can do. I think there's there's all kinds of possibilities around what Rafa did around aggregating these brands and opening a couple boutiques or pop-ups in Soho. So we got a lot of work to do.
Yep.
How big's the team now?
We are a team of 4, and we just started the hiring process to expand the team.
And now it's all about spreading the word. So everybody that listens to this, even if you know somebody that rides, trust me. Like this is not about buying a stock or a startup. Just start spreading the word. DSTNC.com. Distance. Trust that Sharona and Nave have curated the world down into one beautiful experience of media and Shopify. This is the beginning of some massive trend in the software side, and eventually, the hardware side too, which I'm fascinated. But the software side, where the margins are of this biking kind of lifestyle, and what you called extreme. I think you thought what you called endurance
lifestyle.
Endurance lifestyle. All right, my man. I can't wait to go buy some stuff. So it's DSTNC.com.
Yep.
And I'm excited to see what you guys cook up. And thanks for coming on the pod.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Knut! Howard. Not everything is about unicorns. Although I think there are going to be some unicorns. We've seen it with Kith, seen it with Lulu. Mm-hmm. Not quite with Rafa, but I think they're going to be $1 billion kind of cycling brand, fashion brand. But, I finally get to dabble in Fashology, something I've been talking about since the Oakley days. It's not really tech, but it's just everything that I finally have come together, and we've been able to invest in this and really kind of try building a full-on lifestyle brand. And I don't have to do the day-to-day. They are a hilarious couple. Nave's interesting, huh?
Oh, yeah.
He's just got the experience. He's got the eye. He's traveled the world. He knows the sport. And Sharona, man, she's a killer. She just knows fashion and knows she has an eye for culture. So like I said, try it out. And if you have a friend that cycles, just send them there. There's a ton to choose from. And it's just getting going, so the experience, is not quite like the back-end experience will get better around packaging and everything, but right now they're aggregating, and it's just so easy to return stuff because of the way they've structured it. So thanks for listening. This is Panic with Friends. You can search my name, Howard Lindzen. It's Spotify, Google, Apple Podcasts, or Panic with Friends. Search it, subscribe. You'll get a podcast every Thursday. We talk to founders. Talk to venture capitalists, traders, investors. Try and stay a little bit ahead of big trends. Thanks, Knut. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Howard Lindzen is the founder and general partner at Social Leverage. All opinions expressed by Howard and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of Social Leverage or StockTwits. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for decisions. Guests may maintain positions in securities discussed in this podcast.